Hello and welcome to another edition of the Infinite Monkeys podcast. This is a podcast that talks about sports in a much more abstract light, using concepts from economics, math, philosophy, and applying them to the sport we know and love in a way that maybe you haven't thought about. So today we're asking a question that's going to have a lot to do with economics, and it's why does the salary cap keep going up? This year, during free agency, teams are going to have about $12 million more to spend across the board, regardless of what their cap space was to begin with. And this has happened a lot over the last few years, so why? It's not like inflation is going to some ridiculous rate where everything is $12 million more expensive. What keeps driving these prices up to a point where the NFL has to keep raising the cap just to make teams functional? To find our answer, we have to go back to the year of lava lamps, Led Zeppelin, and Charlie's Angels, 1970. And in 1970, there was this guy named George Akerlof, and he was teaching at UC Berkeley. It was actually his first year teaching at UC Berkeley, which is awesome because he got a Nobel Prize for this. But he published an economics paper about something called the market for lemons. And in this case, lemons isn't actually the fruit, it's used cars. Maybe you've heard that phrase before. So think about an economic market for used cars. Now, when you go to buy a used car, there's a chance that you get a good car or a bad car, a lemon. The thing about this is the seller knows for sure, right? He can drive it around, he can take it to a mechanic, he can really learn if it's a good car or a bad car. But as a buyer, you only really know what you can tell right there on the lot. So this creates an inequality of information. The seller knows more than the buyer. And to the buyer, there's a little bit of risk, right? You don't want to pay the good car price and get a bad car, and the seller doesn't want to only get the bad car price if they're going to sell a good car. So they meet in the middle. Say good cars are worth $5,000 and bad cars are only worth $1,000. Most used cars in this market are going to go around $3,000, right between the two. But this creates a really big problem if you're the kind of guy who wants to start selling good cars. You have to pay $5,000 to get them, but you can only turn around and sell them for $3,000. Meanwhile, the guy selling bad cars is going to get them for about $1,000 and be able to turn them around for $3,000 and make this huge profit. So good car sellers are getting priced out of the market while bad car sellers thrive. So if you can't sell a car for $5,000, now the $4,000 cars are the good cars, and now they're getting priced out of the market. And this goes on and on and on, continuing to drive the price down. So how can this possibly be relevant to the NFL and the salary cap where prices are constantly going up? Well, it's the inverse effect, and it has to do with the inequality of information being reversed. In a market for used cars, the sellers are the ones with all the information. They're the ones doing the research, taking the car to a mechanic, driving it around. But in the NFL, the teams are the ones doing research. While players, and to a greater extent their agents, are selling these players as the best that they can possibly be, the buyers or the teams are the ones going through all the rigorous work of scouting and evaluating, watching tape, looking at analytics and statistics. In many cases, the team might know more about how good a player is than that player himself knows. We see this represented all the time, right? We see players go to the media and say, I'm the best, or I'm top tier talent. And they have to believe that to keep that, machismo competitive edge. So now the teams have more information on the players than the actual players, and it has a bunch of effects on the market that are the exact opposite of how the market for lemons works. With the market for lemons, the buyers are the ones who are worried, right? They're the ones worried that they're going to pay more than what the actual car is worth. They're worried they're going to go pay $5,000 and only get $1,000 of value. So all a seller has to do to get priced out of the market is overcharge everyone. You can't sell a car at $5,000 because no one is willing to pay $5,000, so then your price has to go down. But in the NFL, the fear is the opposite. The fears that GMs have is not having enough good players, having too bad of a team, and then that will lead to their firing. So to get, quote, priced out of the NFL or fired, all you have to do is be too stingy. If you're only willing to pay $3 million for a quarterback, which is a position everybody else is paying between like $10 and $25 million for, you're never going to get a capable quarterback, and then you'll never have a good team, and eventually you'll be fired for not being able to build a good enough team. You should have spent more. So while car salesmen are driving their prices further and further down to stay alive, player buyers or NFL teams are driving their prices further and further up to stay alive. In a market for cars, the sellers carry the burden. The market revolves around what the sellers are doing. If a buyer can't afford a car, the seller is just going to go sell that car to someone else. But if a seller can't get his car sold, the market will change to accommodate. That seller will change his price, and then that will cause the other prices around that seller to change as well. In the NFL, the buyers carry the burden. If a seller can't sell, or if a player can't market himself for a reasonable price, the team is just going to go fill that position with somebody else. But if a buyer can't buy, or if a team can't find the player they want at the price they want to pay for it, they're going to change what they're willing to pay for it. So the market is going to change to favor what the buyer is doing. So because all of these players are overestimating themselves and selling themselves as though they're more expensive than they actually are, the prices continue to go up, and then the salary cap has to continue to go up to compensate. The driving force of this whole phenomenon is the players' overestimation of themselves. Most players are denying themselves information by defaulting to a positive evaluation, and I mean, they kind of have to, you can't really blame them, and then they're demanding compensation to reflect that. One interesting case study of a world where this phenomenon doesn't exist is Tom Brady. Brady has continually taken pay cuts in the interest of making his Patriots more competitive. He understands his worth to the team, and he also understands that it diminishes if he's paid too much. The difference between $16 million Tom Brady and $20 million Tom Brady is that $20 million Brady has less talent around him. If he has less talent around him, it's going to make him look worse, even if that isn't his fault, and then diminish his overall value for future contracts or endorsements or whatever. For another example, Kirk Cousins is currently evaluated as a decent quarterback or a middling quarterback who is lifted by great surrounding talent. And if he's smart, he'll do the same thing as Brady. If Kirk Cousins takes a pay cut, it'll go a long way toward letting the Redskins hang on to all of that offensive talent. And if they can hang on to all that talent, and the Redskins are better on the whole, it'll make Kirk Cousins look better. It'll give him a better chance of getting endorsements down the line, or getting a better contract down the line, and that'll more than make up for the equity he loses by taking a smaller contract right now. At the heart of this issue is this machismo culture of the NFL, this idea that players need to market themselves as the best ever, or else they're worth absolutely nothing. The whole idea that if you're not first, you're last, means that everybody has to think that they're first. It causes players to overvalue themselves. It causes players to deny information about themselves. And it means now teams know more about you than you do. That's not a very good context in which to sell yourself. So maybe if players can figure out their own value and make more honest evaluations of themselves, the market for players can force the NFL and salary cap to be a little bit more reasonable. As always, thank you so much for listening to the Infinite Monkeys podcast. I try to keep these short. If you want to hear me talk more and talk about the Vikings, which I'm a fan of, you can listen to me on the Purple Journal podcast with Joe Johnson and Joe Oberle. That comes out every other Wednesday during the offseason and then every Wednesday during the season. Thank you guys again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.